but there's refreshments in the back. They're kind of interesting. So I encourage you to go and check out the refreshments. I believe they're from overseas. Did you hear that? Okay, go ahead. We'll start at least in a couple of minutes, but I want to give you the opportunity to get some things right. What do I think? I'm going to start. We're going to start. Did everybody get a snack? That's great. And also, can you hear me? Mr. Harvey, can you hear me? Mr. Nopa, can you hear me? Thank you. I would like to thank some people. None of us, Sam, for allowing us to use the museum. Provost Landry for being there and helping us with everything. For some reason, I always end up thanking Dr. Carla Britton. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Sheldon Harvey. Thank you, the marketing team, awesome. And Warrior Brown and Smith, Trevor Smith. Thank you, Trevor Smith. And Chris Davis. Thank you, Orlando White. Who else? Thank you, Great Spirit. Thank you, Humor. No one's laughing, even though I said it. I think this is an amazing room. I can't believe this. It's so beautiful, right? So let me introduce our speaker today. Please bear with me, okay? In 1989, Patricio moved from Santa Fe, New Mexico to become the visual arts curator at the Centro Cultural de la Raza in San Diego. In New Mexico, he worked in various capacities in the arts, including as program director of the New Mexico Art Division, Artist in Residence Program Coordinator, and Minority Field Coordinator, increasing the participation of people of color in all NMAD programs. Patricio was director of the ASA Gallery at the University of New Mexico, worked for the Very Special Arts Program New Mexico, editor of the literary arts magazine Conception Southwest, and on-air traffic director and DJ at KUNM-FM, and is still a member of the Races Radio Collective at KUNM. Patricio received his undergraduate degree from the University of New Mexico with an emphasis on Chicano studies, art photography, and art photo history, and his master's in fine arts from UC San Diego as a San Diego Fellow. As Centro Curator, in addition to 5-6 exhibitions and house exhibitions, he curated several exhibitions that toured nationally and internationally, including La Frontera, art about the U.S.-Mexico border, and La Reconquista for the Istanbul Biennial. As an artist, Patricio has exhibited his work locally, nationally, and internationally. He focuses on the intersection of culture, politics, and society and the Chicano experience in the border region. He was a participating artist in the Border Sutures project. Patricio teaches or has taught photography, Chicano art, photo history, and art history at various community colleges, including Diné College, San Diego Mesa College, City College, Grossmont College, and Palomar College. He also taught at the University of San Diego and the UCSD Extension Program. He is interested in education, community, popular culture, visual literacy, the evolution of photographic technology, and visual culture related to social justice, self-expression, identity, and power, especially that of the indigenous and Chicano communities. His artwork examines personal and social history and the social and political landscape of the Southwest and the U.S.-Mexico border region. please join me in welcoming our guest, Patricio Chavez.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to be here. It's kind of coming home of sorts for me. I spent time here at Diné College, the then Navajo Community College, back in the late 80s. So doing this slideshow is a great opportunity for me. Thank you for coming. At this point in my life, in my career and all that, this is a sort of coming together, and I think doing this slideshow is making me think about doing this other larger project coming out of this. And you'll see what I mean when I show you the work. It's going to skip around some in terms of time and place and that sort of thing, but hopefully it'll all make sense to you in the end. And I'd like to definitely thank the Diné College community. I'd like to thank Dr. Kwan and Orlando White. Orlando was kind enough to pick me up yesterday in Durango and bring me here. It was a nice journey, and I'll show you something in a minute about that. Since so much of what I do has to do with time and place and photography's relationship to time and place, I thought I'd start with where I just came from. So this is a recording I recently did, and I have a 22-year-old son back home. We live together still, and this is, you'll hear his voice in this. So this is kind of a prayer of sorts for me to start this way, and I hope it makes sense. So.
Yeah, the green flag. Yeah.
And then this is from last night, driving in. We pulled over, and it was actually quite dark, and this is how it came out. So this is some early work I was doing when I was still living in Albuquerque, and I did this whole series. I'm just going to be showing like a few images from all these different series of the mirrored landscape series, where I was photographing this mirror I would take out into the landscape and sort of combine the landscape. And in photography, there's this long history of mirrors and windows, the photograph reflecting back to us, and then also being a window to see through. So that sort of philosophy has been an important part of my work. And this is an image I took when Jimmy Carter was visiting in Albuquerque. And because of my interest in the representation of power and institutional power, this is an image that I like. And I curated a show called the Political Theme Art Show back at the University of New Mexico. And this was the cover, the poster for that show. And then when I was preparing for this, I found this and got a kick out of this, because this is from a show I did in New York at the Robert Friedis Gallery, and it's a good reminder. So some of these folks are like, you know, big deal photo people like Baldessari and Richard Serra, and anyhow, in the art world, it was funny to be so young and end up being in this show with those folks. So there's this long history of my family, ever since I was very young, driving back and forth between Albuquerque and Santa Fe in California. And I would always pull over and photograph on the side of the road. And this is one of the spots I've been photographing for probably 30 years I've been going back to the Twin Arrows, and it's even changed since these photographs. So these sort of cultural iconographic representations of culture that that you see along the old Highway 66 and I-40 and the 8. I've liked documenting how the landscape sort of takes them back into the landscape. And to a lot of folks, like especially back in San Diego, my students and stuff, I call it the sort of the Cars movie landscape, right? The teepee motels and all that, right? And then I put this in, I found these, I ran across these preparing for this lecture as well. So my mother's side of the family is from Cebolleta, New Mexico, which is right next to Hawaii and Bibo, Laguna, the Laguna area there. And when I was a kid, you know, I was that generation that grew up with that kind of bomb shelter mentality, thinking that if anything ever occurred, you know, I thought I could go to Cebolleta. It's like this remote place, right? The safest town in the world. I made a book about this. And then it turns out that, you know, the uranium, I didn't know about that at this time. And I have some images about that coming up. So my grandmother was the postmaster. My grandfather was the mayordomo of the village, and he oversaw the water. And I have some images of that. Oh, and then I should mention, I guess, I went to work for the New Mexico Arts Commission. That's me with my old mustache there. And this position that they called the minority field coordinator, and my job was it was interesting because the New Mexico Arts Division, you know, New Mexico has this incredible history of indigenous artists, Chicano artists, and none of these artists were part of the programs for the Arts Commission. There was like less than 5% of all the programs they did, and all the money they spent went to people of color or indigenous or Chicano artists. And so they hired me to change that. This was under Tony and I when he was governor. I don't know if any of you remember that guy, but he was a very progressive governor. And we had, like, within 6 months, there was over a 300% increase in participation of people of color. And then this is an image of the Madre Acequia, the main sort of earthen water dam for the water that supplied that whole canyon there by Cebolleta, Powate, and downstream from there that my grandfather oversaw. And then this is the abandoned jackpile mine that is right outside of the villages that a lot of my family went to work there. My uncles all went to work there. Half of them got cancer and died from lung cancer from the uranium. So the irony of the safest town in the world, you know. And there's another picture of the mine. And Orlando was telling me about how much the Navajo Nation has been affected by uranium. I didn't realize how widespread all over it's been affected. So I'm learning a lot about that as well coming here. Then in 1989, I left New Mexico, went to work in San Diego at the Centro Cultural de la Raza, which is it's an abandoned water tank that ended up being the place that became a museum and a gallery for Chicano and indigenous art. And the circle was always this representative kind of holistic, you know, more indigenous circular idea of a circular space, right? They started out at the Ford Building, which is now the Aerospace Museum, if you've ever been in San Diego in Balboa Park. And then the artists Toltecas and Atzlan, they were asked to leave that space so they could build the Aerospace Museum. The artists refused to leave, occupied the space for 12 days, and negotiated the water tank. And in the Chicano community, there's this thing about looking to the indigenous side of the roots of the Chicano people and the warriors coming from that is parallel to, you know, what I'm experiencing here as well, right? So this is what I was just telling you. These are some of the main people at the bottom that have been involved in all of that. Did you want to, can you hear me okay, by the way? Yep. Okay. Is this better? Okay. So the Toltecas, it's that third paragraph down that I was telling you about, that they were asked to leave and refused to leave and then ended up negotiating the space. But the important paragraph here is the one that the Toltecas wrote for themselves. The Toltecas in Aztlán shall be constituted of all those Chicano artists dedicated to human truth and Chicano beauty, which in our belief can only be lived up to through mutual self-respect, self-determination in our endeavors, and the self-sacrifice of our individual differences for the sake of the Centro Cultural de la Raza, where our indigenous ancestral spirit of brotherhood, justice, and peace can flourish in contemporary art forms. So one of the things, if there's any time for discussion or comments or questions that I'm really curious about, is that whole thing, how people from the Diné community feel about this thing of Chicano people and looking towards their indigenous roots and all of that. And the iconography comes through. This is the inside of the water tank, the inside of the building. One of the most important murals in the country, actually, called La Dualidad, that a collective of artists together created. So you can see a lot of the iconography there. That some of it's pre-Columbian, some of it's more contemporary. Looking back to Moctezuma on the very left there, and putting the fire. This is a sort of conquest and pre-conquest iconography, and the violence of the conquest. At the same time, that same group of people that created and founded the Centro Cultural, they also founded Chicano Park, which is very close to the Centro Cultural, and Chicano Park is under the bridge that goes across to Coronado Island. You know, as in many places all over the country, they created a highway or a freeway that bisected the community. They went right through the community and displaced a lot of people. And they were promised a park underneath the bridge, the community was. And what ended up happening was that the community found out they were starting to build a California Highway Patrol station. So the community rose up, occupied the park, and refused, they physically stopped the bulldozers from building the patrol station, and a park did end up getting created. And here's just another older photograph. So these pillars that hold up the bridge going over to Coronado Island now have more than 80 murals, and it became on the National Registry. It's the largest, not just the largest Chicano mural project in the country, it's the largest open public art project in the country. And other communities, there's one in El Paso now, where they have their own Chicano park, and they've done the same thing. But all of these murals, sort of like the mural I showed you inside the Centro, have the same sort of approach to looking at pre-Columbian history and contemporary history for inspiration. This is a recent mural that's dedicated to the Amigos Lowrider Car Club. And all of the paint that was used on this is actually automotive paint. There's an annual celebration in April to commemorate the founding of Chicano Park. And there was a relationship that was created between a lot of the local folks in San Diego and the indigenous Azteca dancers out of Mexico City. And it started to flourish in San Diego as well. This is Frida Kahlo and Los Tres Grandes on the left, Siqueiros and Orozco, and also Diego Rivera. And Orozco, I like to mention because his grandson was one of my closest friends. We were together at the University of UC San Diego, and I have a great photograph of him standing in front of this. But you can see all the different inspiration. Hasta la Bahia. So that's all the way to the bay. They wanted to extend the park all the way to the bay, San Diego Bay, which did happening. This is another recent mural by Victor Ochoa oversaw this, and it's to commemorate, or not commemorate, it's, there's a person, Anastasio Hernandez Rojas, who was killed by the Border Patrol, and they wanted to do something about that killing. It was actually captured on video. A community member captured it on video. Otherwise, it would have never been talked about. It would have just been buried. There was an FBI investigation. They did nothing. But you know, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights took up the case 6 years after his death, and they're still fighting about this. At the time of the mural, there were 111 people had been killed by the Border Patrol since 2010. So there's a long history of violence. And this is to mark the violence against people, to commemorate that. It started under Clinton, actually. That's when it really got bad, under Gatekeeper. So right there next to the park, they recently, in 2022, opened up a museum, and I have a few interior shots of that. So there are now incredible exhibitions taking place at the Chicano Park Museum. A lot of the same folks that founded the Centro Cultural de la Raza, the Chicano Park, are the people that founded the museum. Here's my good dear friend, Marco Anguiano, is the person standing there with his fist up. He passed away a few years ago, and that mural was, he was a member of a group called Unión del Barrio. And then the one on the right are the local lowrider clubs out of San Diego. So I'll be switching back and forth to some of my personal work, some of my collaborative work, and then my curatorial work. This is a series that I did called the Burning Couch series, or the Domestic Icon series, using kind of art speak language, where I took my couch out to the bay in San Diego and lit it on fire as a sort of ceremony and ritual, thinking about the elements: fire, earth, air, water. And this started out thinking about the Corazón Sagrado, the flaming heart, that icon. So that was what prompted the idea to do this series. And I love when this works up in galleries or museums, especially with young folks, asking them what they think this work might be about. I'll go through these fairly quickly. There's some seats up here if you guys want to take those. So what do you guys think this work might be about? Any guesses or ideas? Uh-huh. I had a group of elementary school kids when it was up at the museum in Balboa Park. I was giving them a tour of this show, and I asked them, what do you think this is about? They said, get off the couch and stop watching TV. And I said, you got it. That's what it's about. So this is some curatorial work. This is a show I did with Liz Lerma from Mars Art Space in Phoenix. And then that space no longer exists. And then also out of Mexicarte in Austin, Texas. So, and then the Centro Cultural. So all this stuff was happening, if you guys remember the 500-year anniversary of Columbus, and there were all these commemorations. And we wanted to do something about that. We wanted to say something about that. So we curated this show. It toured regionally. I think it did end up actually going to New York as well. So it was about the conquest and the violence of the conquest. So I'll show a few pieces out of that. And this is a poem that was out of that. Today we will not be invisible nor silent. Today we will not be invisible nor silent as the pilgrims of yesterday continue their war of attrition, forever trying but never succeeding in their battle to rid the Americas of us, convincing others and ourselves that we have been assimilated and eliminated, but we remember who we are. We are the spirit of endurance that lives in the cities and reservations of North America and the barrios and the countryside of Nicaragua, Chile, Guatemala, and El Salvador, all in the earth and rivers of the Americas. So that really captures the spirit of this exhibition. This is a piece by Carm Little Turtle. John Quick to See Smith. James Luna. I love the title of this piece. It's Call Me in 93. David Avalos. And this is Guillermo Gomez Peña from a Border Brujo piece he did. Guillermo Gomez Peña has some great videos online on YouTube, and he's actually doing a performance back in Orange County in a couple of weeks as well. But he's definitely someone to look up, whose work to look up. And if you have any questions as I'm doing this or comments, don't hesitate to ask or say something. Another show, La Frontera, art about the Mexico-United States border. This took place from 93 to 94, hosted by 7 different museums, including the Centro Cultural Tijuana, featuring the work of 27 artists. And I curated this with Madeline Grinstein, who is the curator of the Museum of Contemporary Art in La Jolla. So I'll show some of these pieces. Carmen Lomas Garza on the left. And there's a collective of women artists called Las Comadres who did the piece on the right. You know, it's a library. You can't see it, but the rug, the piece on the floor, is a reproduction of a letter that they received from a white supremacist group in San Diego. Especially back then, they were very active. And there's a list of the individual artists. Yolanda Lopez. Things I told my son about being a Mexican. Luis Jimenez on the right, El Chuco. El Chuco is the nickname for El Paso. Cecilia Alvarez Munoz on the left, and Alfred Quiroz on the right. Alfred's from Phoenix. And then Luis Carlos Bernal on the left. There's a show of his work right now up in Tucson at the Institute for Photography that you should definitely check out if you go that direction. He was from Tucson, no longer alive, unfortunately. He was riding his bicycle he taught at the college there, and someone hit him when he was riding his bicycle to class. Victor Ochoa on the right. These are from a series of loteria cards, that children's game with those iconographic images. Victor calls himself the Chicanosaurus. David Avalos. And then on the right is the Border Art Workshop, which is a collective that emerged out of the Centro Cultural de la Raza in 1984. And they have this long history of all these different artists collaborating with them. And they've done incredible work. And the border was all the rage back at this time. There were galleries and museums, and the NEA was funding projects. The Humanities, National Humanities, was funding border projects. And it was really the Centro and all these artists that put the border on the map, not just politically and culturally, but in the art world. And then this is the show I curated representing the United States in the Istanbul Biennale. And it was sponsored by the U.S. Information Agency. And when they read the essay that I wrote for this show, I was talking about the genocide that occurred amongst indigenous people in the Americas. And the USIA said that if I did not remove the word genocide from my essay, they would no longer fund the project, that we could no longer go to Istanbul. So all of us artists got together that were participating in the project. We refused to remove the word genocide. The Rockefeller Foundation, I contacted them. They stepped in and funded the project. So the artists and myself in the show, we were still able to go to Istanbul to participate. And all around when I was going all around Istanbul, literally there was guys in trench coats and fedoras following me everywhere. And my phone in the hotel room was clicking all the time. It was kind of a strange, scary experience. So on the left, this is Richard Liu and Robert Sanchez. They did a series of interviews that were shown on video. It's called Interest is Not Acceptance. So it was a series of interviews of Chicanos and migrants. And they had this structure of all these different doors. And the basic idea is, even if you're, you come in, but you're not accepted, right, into the so-called white world. And then Amalia Mesa Baines on the right. She uses a lot of sort of domestic iconography. How am I doing on time? 5:40. Hulea Senegeni And she did this piece as a commentary on the enrollment, indigenous enrollment, sort of the issues around that. And this is a project that I did with the border art workshop called Border Sutures, where we traveled the US-Mexico border back and forth, and we would put these big metal staples symbolically to heal the gash or the wound of the border itself. So, you know, now especially, it's interesting what's happening with the whole invasion thing that's occurring in terms of how it's being spoken about, especially by the Trump regime. So what was interesting about this project, I don't know if interesting is the right word, is that there were a lot of personal relationships and contentions within the border art workshop. So by the end of all of us traveling in this motor home back and forth across the border from one coast to the other, back and forth, there were breakups and all kinds of desmadre, as they say in Spanish. So the group broke up by the end of this project, and the work was never seen. It just got buried. No one wanted to show the work publicly until recently, and that's what I'll show you in a few minutes. So I'm going to go through these images fairly quickly. These are the artists involved. The dates and the locations. We tended to try to go near the official crossing locations as well as other places as well. And there's been a lot of my students asking if they could go looking for these staples, if they still might be there. And back in the day, I don't even know if there were cell phones at that time, but we didn't like keep the coordinates. So I think they'd be hard to find. So here's a map. Then different locations. Border baptism, again, using ideas of the elements. Nuevo Laredo. So this is all being recorded, and if any of you want copies of this slideshow, I'm happy. If you want to go more in depth with some of this material, I'm happy to share the slideshow. So we would meet with mostly local people all along the border. We would meet with local people in the community. At this point, the border art workshop was, in the art world, they were huge. So all these different like Art in America, all these different, the New York Times, they wanted to come with us on this trip, and we wanted to keep it like low key because that would have really changed our interactions with local folks. So we didn't do the big art world thing with this. This box was made to float in the water, and it carried a staple. You can see the staple here. This is taking the staple out into the water. I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. It's getting... Here's what a staple looked like. So we're all much older now, but this work had never been seen till recently. So, and the majority of these are my photographs that I took. So there's the motor home. We used to go sleep up there at the top at night. It was beautiful, the stars. This is the tug of war between the Migra, the Border Patrol, and the Mexican wrestlers. So it's okay to go through them quickly at this point. You guys get the idea. And we met with Tohono O'odham elder in Sells, Arizona, and he was telling us how as a young man he would tear the fence down, and I had gone to jail for it. Tecate. This is a young Robert Sanchez. If there's anything you see that you want me to stop at, or just speak up, but so with everything that's going on right now, we're wanting to, rework this project with like young artists, and I'll show you what we did. So a few months ago, we took this work and had a show at the Centro Cultural called Suturing the Border. And it was actually several projects that came together from the Border Art Workshop. The Border Sutures project was just one of them. So this is a representation of the border, this line here. Here's a suture, and then you go through here into the gallery. And then these are some of the different projects that we did. This one was called End of the Line. This is the border suture specifically, the installation for that. And then these are some of the photos I just showed you down here, and some of the videotaping that took place along the border. So this is the first time in all these years that this work has been public again. And a book and a catalog is being created right now about this project. And we all wrote essays for it. And it should be published probably within 3 or 4 months at this point. If any of you are interested, let me know. And here's a Gloria Anzaldúa quote. And I don't know if you recognize this image from the media, but there was the photograph that got out there a lot of a little girl that was standing next to her mother when the Border Patrol had caught them, and she was crying. And so this image was repainted onto the wall and reworked with pre-Columbian symbols from the codexes. This is one of my photographs. And I like showing this between these two images because this photo is what was used to paint this on the wall here. This is the end of the border. This is San Diego, Tijuana. This is where the fence goes into the Pacific. And these, this is tarmac. This is metal landing tarmac that was used for the war in Iraq. This is a piece by Berta Hutar, and it has live video of cameras in Gaza at the border and live video feed of the U.S.-Mexico border at the same time being shown. And this here these are all from olives. This is all the dripping of the juice from the olives and the importance of olive trees to Palestinian people, and how there's these very, very hundreds of year old olive groves that have just been bulldozed. So, okay, I'm getting, this is a piece, Victor Ochoa. Okay, and then I'm gonna end with this. This is a piece I did this year called "Tú eres mi otro yo," and I took. I still have. I don't know if you can make it out in this. In the next one, you can make it out better. I took a Polaroid camera into the gallery and left it on this pedestal here, and then I put 2 mirrors up and ask people to photograph themselves or their friends or family, and then leave the Polaroids on the pedestal. So this says, "You are my other self," or "Tú eres mi otro yo." So one was in English, one was in Spanish. And down on the bottom where it says, "Tú eres mi otro yo," let's see if I can get the cursor over there. That's, you know, the old bronze, where when you're a child, they would bronze your shoes. I don't know if you ever saw those things. So those are my shoes when I was an infant. With they had my mom had a picture of me in there, so I took that and put that mirror in there with the words "Tú eres mi otro yo." You are my other self. So Luis Valdez popularized "Tú eres mi otro yo" amongst the Chicano community, and created this poem about it in Lacatesh. "Tú eres mi otro yo." In Spanish, "You are my other me. Si te hago daño a ti, if I do harm to you, me hago a mismo. I do harm to myself. Si te amo y respeto, if I love and respect you, me amo, respect yo. I love and respect myself." So this was an artist statement I had. So I'll just say the very last sentence. My father always said to people, "Take care." And when he passed in 2014, I started doing the same. So thank you for coming, and take care.
So we have a few minutes. Would you mind entertaining questions if we have any?
No, that'd be fine. Yeah, any thoughts?
Anyone have questions, comments? Back there, Chris Davis.
Uh-huh. You know, when you get like staples, a doctor literally will give you staples if the wound is bad enough. They'll suture your wound with staples. It's the same idea, symbolically using sutures to heal the wound of the border.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Did you originally start out your work in activism, or did you know, or did it just happen naturally?
I did kind of a dual major at the University of New Mexico as an undergraduate, one in Chicano studies and one in art, photography specifically. So doing those 2 things at the same time, they informed each other, you know. So, I mean, I guess prior to, I had always had an interest in photography, but not, I was aware, but, I didn't even know what you could do as an activist before college. So I think in college is when I sort of became aware, and then from then on, I have a whole series, a book I did on the prison series, I call it, on the riots that occurred at the penitentiary of New Mexico. I don't know if any of you were old enough to remember when that occurred. And I'm republishing that book. So yeah, but I also, some of this stuff, it'll become so heavy to me that I'll just have to go out and take beautiful pictures. Okay, I can't, I haven't even looked at the news since the day of the election. I'm like, it's too much, So it's like, that's why I loved doing at the beginning, forgive me for flashing these before your eyes, but the water and shiprock, So I think for me, I think it's important to do both. I guess I'm sort of leaning heavy into the activism stuff with showing all of you, but I think it's, for me, important to do both. The healing of this and this,
Is your work guided mostly by the communities that are impacted?
Yes. And I think there's an incredible synergy that occurs around collaboration, and my work becomes smarter when I work with other people, I think, and I love collaborating. I collaborate with my students, sometimes doing work. And when I started thinking about what to do for this project, all this older stuff came up for me as being important. I've never pulled it together. You were the first ones to ever see me sort of pull everything together like this. And it was, I hope it was, that you got something from looking at this, but for me, it was a really important thing to do. Yeah. What do you do yourself? Are you an artist or?
In the CFA program for photography too.
Oh, excellent. Right on.
And I guess just being more brave and putting myself out there.
Mm.
More in the activist scene, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of daunting, but
I think photography lends itself really well to art and activism, It's on one hand, it's a very accessible medium, but to do it sort of well with sort of any layers or depths can be challenging or difficult. And I don't always necessarily succeed, but even this was, not activism per se, but because I love thinking about how photography works, how a camera works, how we see, the symbolic nature of it in terms of mirrors and windows. And any other thoughts? What about the burning couch stuff? What do you think that was about? Getting just one. But I did burn a television. I did burn a bed. That Domestic Icon series has other images as well. But
Is it a big couch or just an old one?
I love that couch. It was not. It was an offering. Yeah.
Who won between the in the tug of war, the Mexican wrestlers or the border?
The Mexican wrestlers won. We were bigger than them.
It is a little past 6. Thank you so much for showing up, especially at dinner time. We don't have dinner, but we have some snacks. So stick around for a little bit and take some snacks with you. Thank you.
I did bring one catalog if you want to look at it as well.
Thank you, Patricia, once again.
Thank you.